Prince William takes charge and ban Harry and Meghan out of Diana's tribute, and suddenly the quiet war inside the royal family is no longer quiet, it's explosive, it's personal, and it's tearing through decades of silence like a storm that was waiting to happen.
In deciding where Princess Diana was going to be laid to rest, Prince William was consulted. In spite of being a minor, he had a say on where his mother was going to be buried. At the time, he decided that it would be Althorpe because nobody's going to bother her nor harass her or exploit her, most importantly. He thought that his mother would finally find peace. Little did he know.
Meghan Markle has taken things to a new low. How low can you go? I mean, the bar for Meghan Markle is already low. It's in the 7th ring of hell. She did what we all predicted she was going to do. Back on June 24th, I did an episode of this podcast where I laid out exactly what was going to happen when Meghan and Harry took those children to Princess Diana's gravesite, Althorpe.
A man who has carried grief like a shadow for nearly 30 years doesn't just wake up one day and make a decision like this. No, this kind of move, this kind of final, cold, irreversible line, it builds slowly, silently beneath the surface. And then one day, it detonates. Prince William didn't whisper this decision through palace corridors. He didn't soften it with polite royal language. He didn't hide behind advisors or committees. He stepped forward directly, unapologetically, and shut the door, not just closed it, sealed it. And the question that immediately starts echoing through every corner of this story is simple, but unsettling. What pushed him this far? Because let's be honest, this wasn't just about an event. This wasn't just about a tribute. This was about control, about legacy, about something sacred being protected, or, depending on who you ask, something being taken away. And when you look closer, when you start pulling apart the layers, you begin to see something far more complicated than a simple family disagreement. You see patterns. You see tension that didn't start yesterday. You see a clash that has been quietly growing, moment by moment, decision by decision, until there was no space left for compromise.
Prince William has made a bold, shocking, dramatic move, one that nobody can stop him from doing. With this, he has said, enough is enough. You will not exploit the remains of my dead mother. And that goes for Harry, who should have known better. I know many people are still giving him a pass saying, oh, Meghan Markle manipulated him. I don't think so. I think he's fully on board.
For years, the approach coming from King Charles has been hesitant, careful, almost like someone trying to keep a fragile glass from shattering by never gripping it too tightly. Doors were never fully closed. Options were always left open. Conversations left unfinished. But here's where it gets interesting and uncomfortable, because while that hesitation may have looked like diplomacy from the outside, from the inside, it started to look like weakness, like a vacuum. And nature hates a vacuum, especially in a system built on hierarchy and control. So Prince William stepped in, not gradually, not subtly, directly, and the moment he did, everything shifted. Meghan Markle wasn't just excluded quietly. No, this was categorical. Absolute A-line drawn so clearly that there was no room left for interpretation. Not at Windsor, not at the tribute, not anywhere near the space that William has defined as protected. And then comes the part that makes this even more intense, the personal edge. The idea that if he were to cross paths with Prince Harry, there wouldn't even be acknowledgement, not a nod, not a glance. Silence, cold, deliberate silence. And that silence says more than any public statement ever could.
No, she ain't. She's nothing like Diana. She is not compassionate. She is not similar to your mother, Harry. Because your mother would have never done the things to her own family that Meghan is doing to her own family. Think about it, Harry. Wake up out of your stupidness and make a reckoning. Because your day is coming. Your day is coming because of your stupidity, your ignorance, and the things that you have said in comparison to your wife and your mother is an abomination. How dare you?
At what point do you stop honoring Diana and you start using her? Because that is exactly how some of Meghan Markle's social media posts have been looking like lately. It's been part of Meghan's whole brand since she, I think, became into contact with Harry. It was like, let me invoke the late Diana. Oh, here's her son. Okay, what can I do to use Diana? Like, it has been there for a long time. And it appears to me that is exactly what is happening. Meghan is using her legacy. So let's not just forget when Meghan also drove by the tunnel where Diana passed away. I mean, that in itself was such a defining moment that it did, I believe.
Because for Prince William, this isn't just history, it isn't just memory. It's something deeply personal, almost untouchable. Something that belongs to a space far away from cameras, far away from headlines, far away from anything that feels performative. Quiet visits, private moments, no audience, no narrative being built, just presence, just memory. But then on the other side of this story, there's a completely different approach emerging, one that treats that same legacy as something visible, something shared, something that can be framed, presented, even leveraged. And here's where the tension becomes impossible to ignore, because when two completely different interpretations of the same legacy collide, what happens? Who decides what's respectful and what crosses the line? Who defines the boundary between honoring and using?
But what we see now is so egregious and disgusting, because now I see Meghan trying to build a global empire with her proximity to the late Diana. Oh yes. Don't tell me if that is not disgusting, because here is why I struggle with all of this, because Meghan has every right to teach her children about their grandmother, Princess Diana, in private. Keep your disgusting showing of your children who their grandmother was in private. We don't need to see that. That is not for our eyes to see. Because what makes it so bad, what makes it so horrible, is you see her doing this connection to her children, to Diana, publicly, with no signs of reconnecting with her own family. And this is where the wake-up call comes for that dodo head, Harry H. Meghan has a father. She has a family, but she has yet to make any publicly connecting, support, or reconciling with her own family. Not to mention that Harry has never even met his father-in-law. And Thomas Markle has not even met his own grandchildren.
And this is where things start to feel less like isolated incidents and more like a pattern. Not one moment, not one decision, but a series of moves that, when lined up together, begin to tell a story that's much bigger than any single headline. Timing that raises eyebrows. Choices that feel calculated. Moments that seem small on their own but become explosive when connected. Why launch something on a date that already carries emotional weight? Why repeatedly draw visual or emotional parallels that keep pulling the same legacy back into public view? And at the same time, why does another part of the story show distance? Disconnection? Silence towards someone still living, still present? That contradiction sits there, quietly but heavily. It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to, because once you notice it, you can't unsee it. And that's exactly the kind of detail that changes how everything else is interpreted. Then comes the turning point. The moment that, according to what's being said behind the scenes, changed everything. A proposal. On the surface, it sounds almost reasonable. A gathering. A moment of unity. A chance to bring everyone together in one place that carries deep emotional meaning. But look closer. Strip away the surface. And suddenly, the question isn't what it was meant to do, but how it would look. 7 people, 1 location, a setting that carries history, emotion, and global attention, and the possibility, just the possibility, that it could be captured, shared, turned into something seen by millions, a powerful image, a reset, a narrative shift. And that's where Prince William saw something completely different, because to him, that space isn't a stage. It isn't a backdrop. It isn't something that can be framed for a global audience. It's private, sacred, untouchable. And the moment it risks becoming anything else, the line isn't just crossed, it's erased. And that's why the reaction wasn't mild. It wasn't negotiable. It was immediate. Final, the door didn't just close. And just when it feels like the storm couldn't couldn't possibly get any more intense, the cracks start spreading far beyond that single decision, revealing something much bigger quietly collapsing underneath the surface. Because what happens when a boundary isn't just drawn for one event, but becomes the blueprint for everything that follows? Suddenly, the conversation shifts from emotion to consequence, from legacy to survival. Because behind the polished appearances and carefully managed statements, there are whispers growing louder, whispers about money, about pressure, about a system that once offered limitless security now being replaced by something far less stable. And when those whispers begin pointing toward financial strain, toward deals that no longer hold the same power, toward partnerships quietly stepping back, the story takes on a completely different tone. It stops being just about family tension and starts looking like a structure losing its foundation piece by piece. And then comes the part that feels almost impossible: to ignore the idea that everything holding this fragile balance together is now under strain at the same time. Not just public perception, but internal stability. Not just reputation, but reality. Because when insiders start talking about debt, about pressure, about a situation where even separation could push everything over the edge, the question shifts again. Not what happened, but what happens next. And this is where the contrast becomes almost impossible to look away from. On one side, Prince William standing firmer than ever, tightening control, drawing sharper lines, reinforcing boundaries that leave no room for ambiguity. On the other side, Prince Harry caught in something that feels increasingly restrictive, increasingly complicated, increasingly difficult to untangle, and somewhere in between, a system that no longer bends the way it used to. But the ripple effect doesn't stop there. It spreads outward, touching everything connected to that legacy. Even the projects that once stood as symbols of purpose begin to feel the strain. Organizations that carried emotional weight now facing internal fractures. Partnerships that once seemed unshakable quietly weakening. And with every new complication, the same question circles back again. Was this inevitable? Or was there a moment where everything could have gone differently? Then the spotlight swings back to King Charles, and suddenly the hesitation that once seemed compassionate starts to look like something far more dangerous. Because in a system built on clarity and authority, hesitation doesn't stay neutral. It creates space. And in that space, uncertainty grows, decisions blur, lines fade, and eventually someone steps in to redraw them. That someone was Prince William. Because while King Charles held on to the idea of reconciliation, of keeping doors open just a little longer, Prince William was watching something else unfold entirely. Watching how blurred boundaries were being tested again and again. Watching how every gap became an opportunity. And at some point, that observation turned into action. Not gradual, not careful. Immediate, controlled, final, and that's when the entire dynamic shifted. Because this wasn't just about one ban anymore, it became a signal, a message sent outward, not just internally, but to the world watching closely. The era of half measures, of partial access, of blurred roles over, completely over. And when that message landed, it didn't just close one door. It locked multiple doors across the entire system. Access restricted, movement controlled, presence limited. Every step now defined, monitored, contained. Even moments that could have remained private, quiet, untouched now came with conditions. Strict ones. No cameras, no narratives, no reinterpretation later. Because trust, once fractured, doesn't return easily. And in this case, it hasn't returned at all. And then comes the most uncomfortable realization of all the possibility that what we're watching isn't a temporary fallout. It's a permanent restructuring, a complete reset of how everything operates moving forward. Because when Prince William steps into this kind of control, when boundaries are enforced this tightly, when silence replaces even basic acknowledgement, it doesn't feel temporary.